We are live. Good morning.
Good morning, Allan.
Good morning. I'll start with Brian. At least in my screen, you're up in the top left corner. So how are things? How is the inner work going? And we're broadcasting live on Facebook. My name is Allan. This is the online Gurdjieff group. It's Sunday, the 23rd of June. Brian, how are things going there in Scottsdale, Arizona? Nice sun beaming in your window.
Everything's going really good. Still working on the mindfulness with the food, those exercises, taking the visualization while breathing during fitness exercises, and then continuing doing the morning sitting exercise that you have on YouTube. Those are my three main things that I'm focusing on every single day.
So when you're doing your fitness exercises, you're involving at least two brains, right? Your sensory brain, the physical brain, and the head brain with the breathing in, perhaps light or whatever, and then exhaling the gray foggy waste as you breathe.
Yes, and even I mean, I noticed it, and my coach has noticed it also.
Notice what?
Just the boost that I get. I just feel like I'm able to. It just, I don't know. It just makes the workouts a little bit better. I'm able to push myself the extra 10%, and that's when you're really able to get, the physical gains.
Yeah.
Is when you can, just get that extra effort in there.
Yeah. I've mentioned it before in groups, but Mr. Gurdjieff said that we have three centers: a head brain, or a head, body, and feelings, and they're like a coil, a spring. For those of you who used to wear watches in the olden days, particularly the old watches that you had to wind up, they would have a spring, and once the spring was unwound, that center would die. And Mr. Gurdjieff talked about dying by thirds. So my mother died by a third. She suffered from dementia. Her head brain went. Her body was fine. Her feelings were fine, but her mind went. And Mr. Gurdjieff said that this is a big problem. And Catherine Hume, in her notes, talked about dying by newspapers. In other words, excessively reading and involving the head brain without linking it to anything else. And Mr. Gurdjieff talked about how we can create these connections between our centers that then slow this process down. And so doing the visualization and the physical is a way of harmonizing these two springs so they don't run out quickly. If you can add emotion, can you add emotion, Brian, when you're doing that, feeling and a smile and trying to become aware of perhaps joy or something? And then you'll be doing the three brains. It's kind of hard to...
I think I do it, but not consciously, like I think I have those feelings, but they're not like, that's like a, that's secondary to the physical and mental, which is primary, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I would recommend just trying to push the envelope a little bit. Yeah. When we're doing really vigorous exercise, when I've talked about feelings and becoming aware of this atmospheric, shimmering, effervescent, these are just metaphors, quality of feeling. When you're really doing something fully aerobic, you can't fully be aware of that. But afterwards, when you stop and that oxygen is flooding through your system, you can perceive that a bit easier immediately after doing really, really strong exercise. But when you're doing the exercise itself, try and, smile with your eyes, try and bring, the smile with your lips and mouth and body. And so you're into rowing, so just try and do it with the images, the sparkles of light as you're breathing in. Just a little bit. Baby steps. Don't try to overload yourself too much. But the next step is to try and involve all three centers. So become a three-brained being. And when we become a full three-brained being, then we're a full man number 4. So to develop that and to work on that. But that's good. You know, that's initiative, doing it on your own, figuring these things out on your own. And this is something that I like to repeat, is that it's okay to experiment. You don't have to wait for an exercise to be given to you from high. You can experiment. You can try things out. I know that, back in the aughts, the early 2000s, like 2003, 2004, I massively experimented. And for every 100 experiments I would do, maybe 5 would work. But those 5 then led to other things, and they led to other things. And within myself, I also noticed that I could perceive if an exercise was working within 4 to 6 weeks. I would notice something. And if I didn't notice anything, I would chuck it and try something else. So, persevere at some of these. What you're doing, it sounds wonderful. These exercises that you are doing will work, and they will eventually, over time, change you, which is good. Karen, how are you doing down there in Mexico?
I'm fine, Alan. It finally started to rain after the solstice, so it's cool and beautiful and very best part of the year for me.
Is this your rainy season then?
Yes, rainy season is just kicking off after the heat wave of May and early June. So we're in a beautiful place here, and it's only better when the weather's good.
Yeah. How is your inner work going?
Very well. I've had a number of observational insights, one of which is I realized when I was a young girl, I read a book about a guy. This was like a children's book about saving time on things. And I clearly remember this. It was about a guy who instigated in his family with many children time-saving ways of doing things, mainly doing 2 things at once, which I am a master at. So I've been watching that. Being a mother, you kind of have to do 3 things at a time. But now I have no great responsibilities, and I see how often I can't walk to the refrigerator without picking up something to take something, just always looking ahead for how to save time. And it's been really interesting because I don't need to save time, and I see how often doing 2 things at once leads to not doing either one well. So I've been working on that for some months now, but it's really come to a very interesting place where I see already that I'm not going to do 2 things. I'm staying on this. I'm brushing my teeth instead of cleaning off the counter at the same time while I'm brushing my teeth. So it's been good. It's been good in terms of paying attention to the one thing I'm doing.
One of the things that Mr. Gurdjieff, when he was with people, particularly at the Prieuré, the Priory in France, was he would get them to hurry. Not focusing on 2 different tasks, but whatever tasks they were doing, to try and quicken it and quicken it. For Fritz Peters, he had this, when he was 12 years old, he was given this huge set of lawns to mow. And I think he mowed them in 4 days. And then Mr. Gurdjieff said, get it down to 2 days. But focusing on that one task. We can't divide our attention. Contrary to the people who believe in multitasking, your attention flips back and forth between tasks, but you can't split it. I mean, you can grow it so you can be aware of what you see, hear, smell, taste, while sensing your body, while becoming aware of your feelings. And in that sense, you're growing your attention to, cover all 3 of your brains. But, if you're answering the phone and working on the computer and doing something else, those are all head brain activities. And there it becomes much more difficult to wield our attention. And as Mr. Gurdjieff said, the most precious thing that we have is our attention. And he said a moment of inattention is lost forever. and can never be regained. And most people live in a state of inattention. They're not focusing. And what we want to do is we want to harness our attention. So anything else going on with you, Karen, in terms of the inner work or?
Well, another observation I've made that's been very interesting is how I so quickly go to judgment about everything. And I've been trying to pay attention to the intuition that comes in before the judgment. And that's been really interesting because I've seen a lot of ridiculous reasoning behind judgments that are so absurd. A woman's walking down the street and I think, oh, those are ugly shoes. It's just so pervasive that to just be attending to the fact of making a judgment prior to the judgment, I'm able to see something about myself. So that's been another good element of my work.
For myself, judgment. I'm not I didn't used to be a judgmental person, but with the Myers-Briggs personality test, Myers-Briggs, whatever it is, they have polarities. And so, I mean, maybe I'll make this the focus of a meeting sometime in the future to do the Myers-Briggs personality test and to figure out where you're dominant and then to begin to develop the opposite.
I've done that test. I have a good sense of that test.
Yeah.
INFP is my designation.
Yeah, that was mine as well. But the last time I did it, I had moved over to an E. Even though I'm naturally an introvert, I've developed the extroversion enough. And I've also started to try to be a little bit more judgmental in my mind because I was so perceiving and, so I've been trying to balance those functions. If all you can do is be judgmental without perceiving, you're stuck. But if you can be judgmental and perceiving and you can move back and forth, you're actually freeing yourself from one of the laws that constrain you. So to develop that plasticity and that flexibility within our personality is very helpful. It shifts things. So if you're an introvert, watch extroverts, try to model them. Try to see what they do, how they walk into a room. An introvert walks into a room expecting the sky to fall. An extrovert walks into a room going, I'm not alone. Look at all these people here. Wow. And they love it. And rather than walking in with apprehension and social anxiety like I used to try to walk into a room like an extrovert where, the bonding molecule, I forget what it's called, oxytocin, not the opioid drug, but the molecule produced by our pituitary gland that bonds us. People who are extroverts, that gets a boost when they're around people and they feel that connection and that need to bond. And so trying to artificially stimulate that. So if you are a P, these judgments, it's very interesting to observe. I've allowed myself to become more judgmental, and underneath most of them, when I really pay attention, I hear my mother's voice. My mother was a very judgmental person. And a lot of the judgments that I make, particularly when you just see someone, like you said, if they're wearing weird shoes or whatever, I can trace it back to my mother. And that was a very interesting realization. So I don't know, were you been able to trace it back to your childhood or?
Well, yes, my mother's very judgmental too. At my sister's wedding, we walk in and she goes, oh, all the beautiful people are on our side.
Yeah.
So that pretty much nailed it.
That's something my mother would have said as well. Ian, how are things there in Portland, Oregon?
Things are pretty good here. It's been a busy week, probably a busy day. I got a friend's birthday, so that's looking good. As far as the work is going, I've been trying to maintain contact with my sensations, with my body, just coming back to it as often as I can, with the aim of relaxing any tension. I read a quote somewhere Mr. Gurdjieff saying something along the lines of, you know, we waste a lot of energy, and one of the biggest places we waste it is chronic tension held in the body, unnecessary tensions in the body, and that's the easiest one to work with. That was the quote. So I'm mangling it, but that was the idea. And so I've been trying to do that, and I've noticed that when I am able to relax, I get a stronger sense of the feeling, as you describe it, the flowing effervescence. That it's almost like it kind of, when I'm more relaxed, it kind of puffs out of the awareness of it kind of puffs out and it's there. So
did you notice particular areas in your body where you hold the tension? For me, my body, for some reason, I'm able to, you know, I've always been able to relax it. The tension is always in my face. You know, it's like, why are you making that face? And I'm not making a face. Yes, you are. And that's where I'm holding it. And it's like, okay, relax the face, relax the muscles in the face. And actually, Mr. Gurdjieff said it's very important to learn how to relax the muscles in the face. And years ago, I created an exercise just, you know, to relax the, you know, frontalis muscle and the corrugator muscle and the various muscles around the eyes, to learn all of the muscles in the face. And for me, it's the muscles around my jaw, you know, the clenching of my jaw. That's where I held the tension. And so to just relax, let go, release.
The face, definitely, mainly around the eyes. I think there's a lot of fear in and around just sort of this area of the head. There's like a protective, like it's tensed in, and it creates a feeling of distance and safety that's not, you know, true. And then also a lot in the pelvis and the connection to the legs, the psoas muscles, the low back muscles, the abdominal, and then also kind of the not just the shoulders, but the shoulders and like around the collarbone, around the chest, and the shoulder blades in the back, this kind of whole area. There's a lot of tightness there as well. So just a little bit at a time.
Okay. I'm just going to try and pull up my new favorite quote. For those of you watching from Facebook, sorry that you have to see my messy desktop. Whoops. Let me do it a different way. So we're going to do an inner exercise now. So I like to begin these inner exercises with what I know that we can perceive that we're not normally perceiving. So try, let me pull up the quote first. Here it is. Feel, I wish to be. I can be. I have the right to be. I have the ability to be. I swear to myself that this will never be for my personal profit, but to help others. I wish to be to help others. This is to be understood as a vow. So, 3 lines of work for ourselves, for our fellow human beings, and for the planet itself. So it's always good to acknowledge those 3 lines at the beginning of work in our exercises. I'm going to do the J.G. Bennett 60-point exercise that I'm familiar with. The last 2 meetings I did the alternate one. I'm going to do this one. But before I begin, let's just try to develop, however we can, an awareness of the sensation of our body. Try to become aware of gravity, how gravity is pulling us down. Try to become aware of the pressure points underneath our body, perhaps underneath the soles of our feet, underneath our thighs, underneath our sitting bones, where we connect with the earth beneath us. Then we also have the ability to sense temperature, both within ourselves and the temperature around ourselves. So try to become aware of the temperature within your body. This is perhaps easiest to notice in our forehead. As little children, our parents would often put their wrists on our forehead to determine if we had a fever. And if that was the case, then you will have a greater ability to be aware of your own internal temperature in your forehead. You might notice it in the rest of your body as well. Then become aware of the temperature around you. And then try to become aware of the atmospheric pressure around you. If we jump in a swimming pool, we can feel the water around us, but we do have special parts of the brain that are devoted to becoming aware of this atmospheric pressure around us. And then try to become aware of various internal sensations. Perhaps the inside of your throat, your esophagus, your stomach, perhaps your bladder. Try to become aware of the inside, the sensation of the various parts inside your body. And then try to become aware of the external sensations, the touch of air on your face, the touch of clothing on your body. Perhaps even notice the difference in the texture between your pants and your shirt, if you're wearing pants and shirts, to notice the different weave, the different weight of cloth on your body. Now, I should say that this, the gravity, everything that I've talked about now comes from a website called endlesssearch.co.uk, which was set up by a student of Paul Beidler. And so it's part of the ability to sense ourselves. And I have a friend who actually was a member of Paul Beidler's group. And so it's a good way to begin, just to become aware of us here in this moment. And as with the last two meetings, breathe in awareness and then breathe out tension. And we're going to do the one that I was taught years ago. So become aware of the crown of your head, breathing in awareness and breathing out tension. And then become aware of the right side of your forehead, breathing in awareness, breathing out tension. Your right eye, the right side of your nose and face, your right ear and the finer muscles in the right side of your head. The right side of your mouth and jaw. The right side of your throat and neck. Your right shoulder. Your right upper arm and elbow. Your right lower arm and wrist. The top of your right hand. Your right thumb. Your right index finger. Your right middle finger. Your right fourth finger. Your right baby finger. The palm of your right hand. The right side of your chest. The right side of your midriff and abdomen. The right side of your upper back and right shoulder blade. The right side of your lower back. Your right hip and buttock. Your right upper leg and knee. Your right lower leg and ankle. Your right heel. The top of your right foot. Your right big toe. Your right second toe. Your right middle toe. This one's the hardest for me. Your right fourth toe. Your right baby toe. The bottom of your right foot. Now reversing this process and breathing awareness in and tension out. The bottom of your left foot. Your left baby toe. Your left fourth toe. Your left middle toe. Your left second toe. Your left big toe. The top of your left foot. Your left heel. Your left ankle and lower leg. Your left knee and upper leg. Your left buttock and hip. The left side of your lower back. Your left shoulder blade and upper back. The palm of your left hand. Your left baby finger. Your left fourth finger. Your left middle finger. Your left index finger. Your left thumb, the top of your left hand, your left wrist and lower arm, your left elbow and upper arm, your left shoulder, the left side of your neck and throat, the left side of your jaw and mouth, the finer muscles in the left side of your head and your left ear, the left side of your face and nose, your left eye, the left side of your forehead, and then finishing with the crown of your head. Now, this is my own addition. As you breathe in, pull the awareness up the left side of your body, and as you breathe out, allow it to flow down the right side. Breathing in awareness up the left side of your body, and then breathing out awareness down the right side. Just circle around your body for a few breaths. And then allow your attention to rest. And now we're going to do Mr. Gurdjieff's filling exercise. As a vessel fills with warm golden honey, allow your body to slowly fill with sensation from the bottom, slowly filling up to the top. So become aware of the bottom of your feet. And then slowly allow your feet to fill with sensation. And then filling with sensation from the bottom of your feet up through your ankles, the lower part of your lower legs, the middle part of your lower legs, the upper part of your lower legs, to your knees, the lower part of your upper legs, the middle part of your upper legs, right up to the top of your upper legs, your hips, your pelvis. Now allow it to spread to your hands as well. So filling with sensation from the bottom of your feet to your hips and hands. Then up through your lower torso, lower arms, up past your midriff elbows, up past your upper torso, your chest and upper back, your upper arms, and filling with sensation from the bottom of your feet all the way up to your shoulders. Then allow the sensation to continue up slowly through your neck and then into your head, and then up slowly through your head to the top of your head, filling with sensation from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head. And try to hold this awareness of your body for the rest of this meeting. This is the most important step in this process. It's a preliminary basic step. If we do not master this ability to sense our whole body completely, to sense our body as one organic whole, we can't really go on to higher exercises. This is the grounding, the foundational exercise, so to speak, the sensation of self, to use Mr. Gurdjieff's term. So try to maintain this sensation of self. Try to become aware of your body as one organic whole. And then allow your attention to rest. And we're going to finish with the collected state exercise. As the earth has an atmosphere, so too do we have an atmosphere around us. But for most people, and for us most of the time, our atmosphere is very dispersed. If we become identified with something, our atmosphere moves in that direction. If we think of our mother, our atmosphere moves in the direction of our mother. Whatever our thoughts are captured by, our atmosphere moves in that direction. Also with feelings. If our feelings are not calm and tranquil and joyous and loving, if they're jangly feelings, this disturbs our atmosphere and makes our atmosphere get dispersed. And the sensations of our body can also disrupt the atmosphere. This is why it's important to keep the body, the feelings, and the mind calm. Make sure your thoughts are calm, your mind is calm, your body is calm, and your feeling is calm. And draw your atmosphere towards yourself. Make it so that it's no more than a meter, meter and a half. That's 4 to 6 feet. Keep your atmosphere around you. Draw it in. Become aware of the boundary of your atmosphere. And in a moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 3. And when I get to 3, breathe your atmosphere in. And as you breathe out, imagine that something remains inside of you, that something begins to settle inside of you from your atmosphere that was created through this inner exercise we just did. So stay calm, collect your atmosphere, tranquil. 1, 2, 3. Breathe your atmosphere in, and as you breathe out, imagine something remains. Again, the imagination is the head brain, imagining something remains inside us. And then it's always good to begin or to finish in our work with an affirmation. And this is Mr. Gurdjieff's affirmation. May results from this exercise, repeat this in your mind, may results from this exercise be transubstantiated within me for my being. And then just slowly allow yourself to return, to come back. Are there any comments about this inner exercise? Any observations? You don't have, that doesn't have to be any comments. You don't have to share any observations. But if you have a comment or an observation. Oops, sorry, I've muted all the microphones because I was hearing something. I'll unmute then. Brian, I saw your mouth moving.
Could you just give a little more explanation and detail on what transubstantiation means?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. It means to transform. But the thing about the use of the word transubstantiation, the fact that you asked me that question gives me a little bit of insight into your background. If you were Catholic, you would not ask me. You might be a little offended by the use of that word, because in Catholicism, the wine and the bread, when the priest lifts them up and says some kind of incantation, it is believed that they are transubstantiated into the body and the blood of Jesus. So transubstantiation is, there's that mystical element. And for those who are, have a background that, are Catholic, I'm not Catholic. I was actually raised agnostic, but I've studied a lot about religion and the whole Catholic idea of transubstantiation. So it really, if you look in the dictionary, it's defined as transforming. So when we eat our food, the food gets transubstantiated, it gets transformed. But rather than using the word transformation, Mr. Gurdjieff, using the word transubstantiation is adding just a subtle layer that those people, not just Catholics, but those also who are Orthodox Christian and who go to Mass and take communion and believe that communion is literally it gets the wine and wafer literally get transubstantiated into the body and blood of Jesus. And so when they eat it, they are participating in the Last Supper, so to speak. So it's got these mystical connotations. So today, I'm going to talk about personality and essence. But before I do, sort of one of my bugaboos or pet peeves is the use of the phrase false personality. Whenever anyone uses the term false personality, I know they've spent a little bit too much time reading Maurice Nicole's The Psychological Commentary of the Gurdjieff Uspensky teachings, whatever the book is called. All personality is false. There is no such thing as true personality. And I'll just make an aside here. If your introductions to these teachings were through the commentaries, great. If they were through Uspensky's book, The Fourth Way, great. If they weren't, my advice is rather than read Nicole's commentaries, a massive 5-volume series, read In Search of the Miraculous 5 or 10 times. Rather than reading The Fourth Way, read In Search of the Miraculous. I find limitations both in The Fourth Way and in Nicole's psychological commentaries. I don't want to go into that now. Perhaps I can explain that, in a later meeting. They're more of the movement down. Octaves either move up or they move down, and there are mistakes, there are slight errors that crept in to Uspensky that get magnified in Nicole. But and false personality, I know when people step on that term, they have read commentaries. It's one of those little things that I've just picked up over the years. There is no false personality. It's all false. There's no true personality. It's all false. The definition, the simple definition, is personality is what is not our own. It comes from the outside. And essence is what is our own. It comes from the inside. A metaphor I came up with years ago was a garden. Imagine a garden with natural seeds and crops and plants that bloom. But seeds flow in from the outside and they land in the garden. And quite often those external seeds that come from the outside are so strong and take up so much of the soil and everything that they block the light out for the native plants. And this is just a metaphor. Another metaphor I came up with, and this one goes back to the beginning of my journey within these teachings, was I imagined this globe, this glass sphere, and inside was essence. And personality was on the outside, and all sorts of things get written on the outside to the point where nothing from the inside is able to shine out or be revealed. And personality is what is false within us, what comes from outside. So for instance, these words that I'm using are all part of personality, but not all of language is personality. There's a strong component within language that is essence. But the words that I use, my English words, are personality. I learned them from the outside. I heard people say, Allan, you, this, that, you know, the map, the world, these things, and I learned those words. So the words in our language are all personality. And personality comes through our education. It comes through the influences of life around us. But it gets even more complex. And I'm going to pull up some quotes. And these quotes all come from In Search of the Miraculous. Just give me a second. Okay, I may have, there. Oops. So this is Mr. Gurdjieff speaking to Uspensky and the other 5 members of the group in St. Petersburg, which included Anna Butowski, wonderful book, you know, Gurdjieff, with Gurdjieff in St. Petersburg and Paris. She was brought into the work by Uspensky, but this is from Uspensky's book. I mentioned before about fate and accident in man's life. We will now take the meaning of these words in more detail. Fate also exists, but not for everyone. Most people are separated from their fate and live under the law of accident only. Fate is the result of planetary influences which correspond to a man's type. We will speak about types later. In the meantime, you must grasp one thing. A man can have the fate which corresponds to his type, but he practically never does have it. This arises because fate has relation to only one part of man, namely his essence. So what he's saying here is that personality is ruled by the law of accident, by our culture, by our upbringing, by all sorts of influences. And another mental experiment or a thought experiment to differentiate what is personality within us and what is fate is to imagine that at birth we were split into 2 beings, like twins, and one part of us was raised in a different language, a different religion, and a different culture in a different part of the world. And they both grow up. One grows up like we grew up, and the other grows up with a completely different language, culture, geography. And they meet. And what is the same within them? The sameness can be related to essence, and the difference can be related to personality. So it's just a way to think about ourselves, a way to begin to work with this concept. It must be understood that man consists of 2 parts, essence and personality. Essence in man is what is his own. Personality in man is what is not his own. Not his own means what has come from outside, what he has learned or reflects, all traces of exterior impressions left in the memory and the sensations, all words and movements that have been learned, all feelings created by imitation. All this is not his own. All this is personality. And most of us are personality. For a lot of people, personality is so dominant. It's like those seeds that came in from the outside into the garden and strangled or blocked the light out, so preventing essence from growing. And this is where it actually gets interesting. This is a part of understanding essence that a lot of people just haven't quite picked up on. From the point of view of ordinary psychology, the division of man into personality and essence is hardly comprehensible. It is more exact to say that such a definition does not exist in psychology at all. A small child has no personality as yet. He is what he really is, his essence. He is essence. His desires, tastes, likes, dislikes express his being as such. And, this ties into, the Christian teaching, we must become as little children in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. So if you have the opportunity to be around small children, 3, 4, 5-year-old, they are beings of essence. If you study them and try to understand just what it is that makes them such special beings, it's because they are essence. Now, I don't have any small children in my life now, but I'm still very good friends with my ex-wife. Her son now is 15. He's going to be 16 in 2 days. But when he was a small child and I would visit my children quite often in her home, I got a real chance at that point to observe essence, that magical nature. Starting at about the age of 2.5, up to around 5, 6-ish, very much beings of essence. And then to watch the acculturation and personality sort of get sort of impressed on him was a very interesting thing. It was a longitudinal study that I did, unofficial, just in my own mind. But because I was, in his home 3 to 4 times a week, and I spent, a lot of time with him, I was able to observe this change. It's much harder to observe in your own children because you get a little frazzled and you're juggling too many things. And sometimes it's easier to observe outside of your own family, so to speak. If you're a parent, you're a little too frazzled, lack of sleep at that phase. But, if you have grandchildren or nieces or nephews, look at them. Think of them as beings of essence. But as soon as so-called education begins, personality begins to grow. Personality is created partly by the intentional influences of other people, that is by education, and partly by involuntary imitation of them by the child itself. In the creation of personality, a great part is also played by resistance. And what he means here is that a child learns to hide behind personality. They learn to become insincere. If they show their essence, quite often the adults in their life will just stomp it down. And so part of personality at that early development is a protective mechanism. It's like developing a shell or an exoskeleton around us, and we can hide away inside the exoskeleton, and it's a protective mechanism. But, it can begin as a fortress, but what begins as a fortress becomes a prison. The next quote, and as I said, these are all from In Search of the Miraculous. I could find the actual page numbers, but I don't have them here. It's very simple, just to do a search, Google, and you'll find them. The next quote. Essence is, actually, I want to go back to one other thing here in this first quote. Most people are separated from their fate and live under the law of accident only. Living under the law of accident means being centered in world 48, the planetary realm. But so the realm of personality is actually twice as dense, twice as stupid, half as vibrant as essence. It's linked to hydrogens, it's linked to levels of being. So fate, or most people are separated from their fate and live under the law of accident only. Fate is the result of planetary influences, which corresponds to a man's type. And let me see if I can come back over to my wonderful diagram here that I really love. I shouldn't love it so much, but it explains so much. The red, world 48, the earth. If we look at the ray of creation over on the right-hand side, let me try and, so the ray of creation over here, we can see the level of the earth. This is where the law of accidents come into play, whereas the essence corresponds to the planetary realm. So personality is of hydrogen 48. It's made up. It exists at that level. It's very mechanical. It's very habitual. It's very automatic. And essence is of a higher quality. It's fueled by a higher energy. Personality is of the earthly realm, over on the right here, and essence is of the planetary realm. So one is centered in world 48, the other in world 24. So there's a denseness to personality. There's a mechanicalness to personality. So what we know of ourself in world 48, it's mechanical, automatic, reactive. It's very machine-like, very habitual. These qualities can also be applied to personality. And then that's the law of accident. The law of accident rules world 48. And the first step away from the law of accident is to the law of fate. There's another level above that where we can step beyond fate, but the first step up is into the law of fate. And within that quote, Mr. Gurdjieff said, types are related to the law of fate. They're related to essence. And this is something that I've quoted before. I'm not going to pull the quote up now, where Mr. Gurdjieff talks, someone says, he talks about types, and someone asks him a question, well, can you tell us all the types? And Mr. Gurdjieff responds, don't you think if I could tell you, I would have? And he then infers that it requires an evolution of our being and a growth in our being before we can even begin to understand types. Types are essence types. So that there is a type to your essence, and your essence exists under the law of fate. So this is stepping up to a higher level. It's stepping up to the planetary realm. So by, for instance, becoming mindful of your body, by sensing your body, by becoming aware of your body from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, your awareness has actually stepped up to the level of essence. And so all mindful activity, the mindful perceiving through my eyes, so what I can see, the mindful awareness of what I can hear, the mindful awareness of what I can smell, the mindful awareness of the taste in my mouth, these are head brain, the sensation of my body, the sensation of self, this is my body brain, the awareness of what I may be feeling right now, the mindful awareness of feeling of my feeling brain, all of these activities nurture essence. They all reinforce it and make it stronger and help our essence to grow. So in a sense, our essence can be linked with World 48, World 24, our personality with World 48. So whenever we engage in any kind of mindful exercise, whenever we begin to do inner work, we are actually helping to grow our essence. And here also, and as an aside, and something very important to understand, personality and essence only exist in Search of the Miraculous. I remember when I first made my way through Beelzebub Tales the second time, I was looking for personality and essence, and he doesn't use those terms. He doesn't define them in that book. And he knew that Ouspensky was teaching them, and this was on purpose. So it's something to consider. I connect essence with the development of the Kesdjan body. I connect it with the growth of our being in World 24. So all inner work, everything that we do, the sensation of our body, the external perceptions that we can receive through our eyes, ears, nose, taste buds, becoming mindful of our feelings, these all help to enhance our essence. Now let me come back here and go back to the quotes. Essence is the truth in man. And actually here, an aside, one of the limitations of Ouspensky and all of those who were connected to Ouspensky, like Maurice Nicole, is the thought's fallen out of my head. Is the here it is. It's the overbelief that essence is the promised land, that we're aiming to grow our essence. And essence is the goal. It's not the goal. The goal is the next level up. The goal is the solar realm, the realm of hydrogen 12. When you are stuck in personality, essence seems like this promised land. It seems like this luminous state, but it's not the be-all and the end-all. You read In Search of the Miraculous, you read The Fourth Way, you read Nicole's commentaries, and essence is made out to be the promised land, the attainment, the growth of our essence. But the level of hydrogen 24, the planetary realm, is the realm of humanity. World 48 is the physical realm, the planetary body. Mr. Gurdjieff said, do not become identified with your body. Your body belongs to the earth. He also said, do not become identified. And this was to Catherine Hulme in her conversations with Mr. Gurdjieff. He also said, do not become identified with essence, because it's human essence. It's like a cup. And the cup is filled with human essence, and we are a drop of that essence. And do not become identified with our essence, because it is also not our own. It belongs to humanity. So when we do this work for ourselves, when we do it for our fellow human being, and when we do it for the earth herself, this is woven into an understanding at a deeper level of what that means. So the work that I do in the development of the Kesdran body, the work that I do to grow my essence, has an effect on humanity as well. And to not be identified with essence. And this was something that J.G. Bennett understood. He said that the experience of ourself at the level of the planetary realm, at the level of essence, can be very bitter and very reactive. In one sense, the Old Testament metaphor of Exodus, slavery, bondage in Egypt, represents ourself at the planetary level. The wilderness years represents the essence, and it's only crossing the River Jordan into the Promised Land that represents the higher state. But if we can think of these metaphors of bondage, of slavery, some of the slaves in Egypt had it really nice. They oversaw their master's affairs. Other slaves had it really bad, but none of them had any kind of freedom. And if we can ponder the metaphor of slavery rather than machines, we can gain an added insight into the nature of personality. And essence is that step up into the wilderness. And there was something bitter about the wilderness, in the Bible. Why did you bring me into this wilderness? I would have had a full stomach and food if I had remained in Egypt. And there's a quality of that to essence that Uspensky, Nicole do not pick up on, because they didn't spend long enough with Mr. Gurdjieff to realize that the real promised land is the development of the real I. So back to this. Essence is the truth in man. Personality is the false. But in proportion as personality grows, essence manifests itself more and more rarely and more feebly. And it very often happens that essence stops in its growth at a very early age and grows no further. It happens very often that the essence of a grown-up man, even that of a very intellectual and, in the accepted meaning of the word, highly educated man, stops at the level of a child of 5 or 6. This means that everything we see in this man is in reality not his own. What is his own in man, that is his essence, is usually only manifested in his instincts and in his simplest emotions. There are cases, however, when a man's essence grows in parallel with his personality. Such cases represent very rare exceptions, especially in the circumstances of cultured life. Essence has more chances of development in men who live nearer to nature and in difficult conditions of constant struggle and danger. So the country bumpkin, as opposed to the city slicker. The city slicker is personality. The country bumpkin, because he grew up closer to nature, his essence is more developed. And here, I don't have it in the quotes that I have today, but Mr. Gurdjieff said, personality should not be eliminated. It's necessary. It's how we interface with the outside world. But essence and personality should grow together. We don't want personality to be dominant and strangle essence. But without some personality, without the development of personality, I wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't be understanding ideas and various things that I absorbed from the outside, so that they are both necessary. Just like our physical body is necessary, we can't live without our physical body. To deny the body is to deny a level of our reality, and there are religions that deny the body. You are not the body, just forget about the body. You are a spirit soul, and it's to deny a substantial and important part of who we are. But as a rule, the personality of such people is very little developed. They have more of what is their own, that is these country people, these people who live in places of danger, but very little of what is not their own. That is to say, they lack education and instruction. They lack culture. And here is something also, very important to realize: culture creates personality. This statement, culture creates personality, allows us to locate culture. Culture is a World 48 phenomenon. So my culture, the culture of someone on the other side of the world, these are mechanical, they're habitual, they're automatic. All of those terms that we can apply to World 48 apply to culture. We do not realize that the whole of our life, all we call civilization, all we call science, philosophy, art, and politics, is created by people's personality. That is, by what is not their own in them. The element that is not their own differs from what is man's own by the fact it can be lost, altered, or taken away by artificial means. And in Search of the Miraculous, Mr. Gurdjieff demonstrates this through the use of hypnosis with two people. One of them was really cultured, able to philosophize and talk at a very high level about certain subjects. And when he was hypnotized and his essence was separated from his personality, he was like a little baby, almost undeveloped. His personality had so blocked the development of his essence. The other person was actually fairly quiet, I believe, during meetings and stuff like that. But when he was hypnotized and they were separated, his essence was much more there, much more well developed. So the person who had ideas about this and that, and the nature of good and evil and warfare and God and philosophy and all of those things, their essence was like was almost strangled. While the other person who didn't pontificate on all those subjects, who didn't read all those books, their essence was fairly strong. And Mr. Gurdjieff also implied that there are certain substances that, if ingested, can lead more to essence rather than personality and an understanding of essence. He didn't talk about what those were, but he did mention that. The next quote, again, these are all from In Search of the Miraculous. Man has no permanent and unchangeable I. Every thought, every mood, every desire, every sensation says I. And in each case, it seems to be taken for granted that this I belongs to the whole man, and that a thought, a desire, or an aversion is expressed by this whole. In actual fact, there is no foundation whatever for this assumption. Man's every thought and desire appears and lives quite separately and independently of the whole. This is the concept of the multiplicity of eyes. I won't go into that. Hopefully you'll have some acquaintance with that. And the whole never expresses itself for the simple reason that it exists as such only physically as a thing and in the abstract as a concept. Man has no individual I. And that's part of these teachings, is to develop this unity, this permanence, this real I. But there are instead hundreds and thousands of separate small I's, very often entirely unknown to one another, never coming into contact, or on the contrary, hostile to each other, mutually exclusive and incompatible. Each minute, each moment, man is saying or thinking I, and each time his I is different. Now it was a thought, now it is a desire, now a sensation, now another thought, and so on, endlessly. Man is a plurality, man's name is legion. The alternation of I's, their continual obvious struggle for supremacy, is controlled by accidental external influences. Warmth, sunshine, fine weather immediately call up a whole group of I's. Cold fog, rain, call up another group of I's, other associations, other feelings, other actions. There is nothing in man able to control this change of I's, chiefly because man does not notice or know of it. He always lives in the last I's. Some I's, of course, are stronger than others, but it is not their own conscious strengths. They have been created by the strength of accidents or mechanical external stimuli. Education, imitation, reading, the hypnotism of religion, caste, and traditions, or the glamour of new slogans create very strong I's in man's personality. So our personality is made up of these external mechanical I's that come from outside of ourselves. But their strength is the strength of the roles in the centers. And the roles are where these things get impressed on us, on something inside of us. And all I's making up a man's personality have the same origin as these roles. They are the result of external influences, and both are set in motion and controlled by fresh external influences. So here he is talking about a metaphor that he used. The way, old vinyl records, the sounds were impressed on them. And even before then, they were actually like these wax rolls where sounds were impressed onto these rolls. And so external impressions enter us and they get impressed on some kind of substance within us. And the external impressions that get impressed on us, and even he didn't really fully explain this to Ouspensky, but we also have internal impressions. Our thoughts can leave an impression. The images in our mind can leave an impression on this, whatever it is, mind stuff, this inner stuff. So personality is dominated by the multiplicity of I's that come from outside of us. Personality is dominated by culture, as he said, the hypnotism of religion, culture, our environment, slogans. We just have to look at the news today, and using this sort of as a prism to look through, we can understand this, what's going on in Britain right now with Brexit, and what's going on in America with Donald Trump, what's going on in Brazil with Bolsonaro, what's going on, in various places of the world. It's like personality and slogans and, this appeal to the man-machine, to the slave-like personality, this appeal to personality not just an appeal, but impressing, make America great again, or we must leave the European Union, or whatever. These are reinforced by the outside world. And when we understand that those people who are involved in those actions are more like machines, they live and are embedded at the level of World 48. And, that's where things happen, where they are subject to all sorts of external influences. They haven't attempted to work on their essence. They don't even understand the differentiation between personality and essence. And so this is why, we shouldn't get too upset at them, because they're machines. They act the only way they can act. They've been programmed that way. Their personality has developed that way, to the exclusion of the development of their essence. There's a few more quotes, but maybe I will save them to the next meeting, to go into them in a little bit more detail, because I think there's only 7 minutes remaining. Are there any comments, any questions so far about what I've said? Ian?
I'm struck by, I can't remember in this moment if it was something you said or from one of the quotes, but there's something about essence being kind of raw or fierce. The feeling that came to me was of like anger or wildness or resentment, something that I would normally consider just a negative emotion or experience. And
according to according to J.G. Bennett, if you look and study the food diagrams and go back to chapter 9 of In Search of the Miraculous, personality is at the level of the mind, so to speak, the head brain. Essence, there's a movement back to emotions. But according to J.G. Bennett, essence is a realm of very reactive emotions.
That was it.
You swing back and forth. I'll bring this up in the next meeting I'll get the quotes where Mr. Gurdjieff said, talks about love, hope, and faith. The middle ones are the realm of essence. And so at the level of essence, you can be so in love with someone, you ask them to marry them, you get married, and then something happens and you despise them and you hate them. And there's a reactive nature to the emotions at the level of essence. And this is why essence is not an ideal state. It's a transitory state. But there's this, this real polarity between, 1 minute you're in love with this person and the next minute you can't stand them. These deeply reactive emotions. And so, the quotes of Mr. Gurdjieff on love, hope, and faith, if you look at them, and I'll bring them up at the next meeting, the first one is ourselves at the level of World 48, at the level of personality. The next one is ourself at World 24, at the level of essence. And the top one is ourself in World 12. And if you read the middle ones, for love, hope, and faith, you'll realize that they're not that good. And so essence is not the promised land. To get to a level of stability, you've got to step beyond that level. J.G. Bennett also said it was like there's a line above the, from 12 up, hydrogen 12 up, there are no opposites. Polarities enter at the level of essence, at the level of 12 down, at the planetary realm down. So at the level of real I, hydrogen 12, I like to think of love as the cerebral emotion, the head brain, the positive, peace as the physical, and joy as the emotional. And at that level, love, peace, and joy are like one. But when we come down to the level of essence, when we come down to world 24, love splits into its opposite and becomes love and anger. Peace becomes peace and fear. And joy becomes joy and despair. And polarities enter and we become third force blind as we move from the level of essence down through personality. So, yeah.
I guess just thank you, to further kind of pull that out. If essence is such a reactive area or part of ourselves or whatever, there's also an idea of the essence being either very young or kind of more developed, kind of grown up. And is it fair to say that if we were able to educate the essence or grow the essence, that it would become less reactive?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
We do that through the exercises and the work. And
yeah, I as I said earlier, in my own mind, I link the development of essence with the development of the Gurdjieff body. And if you can grow the Gurdjieff body, you've got to do it, and I've talked about this many times, in the proper form and sequence. So head brain, body brain, feeling brain. We grow our essence in a more balanced way. And that's only supposed to be a stepping stone. The Gurdjieff body is a stepping stone. We develop that so we can actually develop the higher being body at the level of the solar realm, hydrogen 12, that level. So when we begin to develop the essence in a balanced and harmonized way, I do believe, and this is my own belief, it becomes less reactive, less like that pendulum swinging back and forth. The other thing to just about out of time, man number 4, you're not just man number 4, it's a continuum. There might be 7 notes in man number 4. Essence is the same. There's the lower essence, and as we grow, the essence moves up. So say perhaps within the planetary realm, within hydrogen 24, there could be a full octave of development at that level. So as we grow our essence, as we develop along that octave, we begin to develop greater coherence, and we begin to develop the harmonization of our 3 brains, and we begin to develop a more balanced essence. But essence can still be just pulled by circumstances. It's still subject to fluctuation, and it's the development at the next level that brings a level of stability and prevents that from happening. At any rate, I would like to thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank those of you who are watching Facebook Live, and those of you who are later going to watch this on YouTube. I'm going to continue this discussion next week, but try to become aware of what is real within you, your essence. Try to be more mindful and realize that that's at the level of essence. Try to become aware of your automatic, habitual routines. Perhaps a politician makes you livid, or perhaps you love them. Try to become aware of those reactions. Try to see what is mechanical, see what is part of your personality, and try to differentiate personality from essence. At any rate, I want to thank you all for being here. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you, Allan.
Thanks,
Thank
Allan.
you very much.